Up next in the broadcast, Korea and China celebrate 22 years of diplomatic ties this weekend. In that short time frame, Beijing became Seoul's largest trading partner. And with strong U.S. relations on the other side, experts say President Park has so far successfully managed this tightrope diplomacy. After a brief sign of hope earlier in the week, political parties are back in deadlock at the National Assembly over how much power to give an investigative panel into April's deadly ferry disaster. Korean nationals in Japan say Tokyo urgently needs new policy against hate speech, and the United Nations is backing up that claim by looking into concerns about discrimination against Koreans in Japan. Primetime News begins now.
Welcome to Primetime News, live from Seoul. This is Primetime News. I am Kang Tae-ri.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Well, lawmakers may be in deadlock at the National Assembly over the Sewol-ho ferry bill, but some legislators will find themselves locked behind bars after state prosecutors arrested 3 politicians late Thursday night.
It's the first since the Park Geun-hye administration launched a campaign to root out corruption in the wake of the April ferry disaster. Our National Assembly correspondent Ji Myung-kil has this report.
The legislators who were arrested are ruling Saenuri Party representatives Hyun-yong and Park Sang-eun and main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy representative Kim Jae-yun. A local court rejected the prosecution's request to arrest 2 other lawmakers from the main opposition party. Kim Jae-yun is charged with taking up to around $50,000 in bribes from the head of a Seoul vocational school in return for favors in getting legislation passed. The ruling party's Cho Hyun-yong is suspected of taking bribes worth more than $150,000 from a railway parts supplier in return for awarding the firm private company contracts since August 2008. Park Sang-eun has been under suspicion of taking nearly $600,000 from his former company in violation of the political funding law and covering up his illegal funds. Advocates of the government's anti-corruption drive say these arrests show the government is more than willing to track down cases of corruption and punish those involved. The government pledged to eradicate corruption in the wake of April's ferry accident, as it was found that corrupt and collusive ties between government officials and businesses played a large role in the sinking. But it's a double-edged sword. If the lawmakers are found guilty, it will show that representatives in the National Assembly have taken money from people, organizations, and private companies in return for influence in Parliament. Ji Myung-kil, Arirang News.
North Korea says it's sending 273 athletes and staff to the upcoming Asian Games, set to begin on September 19th in Incheon, South Korea. That's 80 people fewer than originally planned. Seoul has accepted Pyongyang's proposal to discuss the details of its participation via an exchange of letters. The message was delivered by a small North Korean delegation that was in Incheon to attend the draw for the Asian Games football tournament. North Korea did not comment on previously announced plans to dispatch a cheering squad to the event. North Korea appears to be putting the finishing touches on a number of upgrades to a rocket launching site near the West Sea. Using recent satellite imagery, the U.S.-based website 38 North says modifications to the Sewol-ho satellite launching station should be complete by the fall, opening the door for possible launches by the end of this year. The upgrades mean Sewol-ho would be capable of handling rockets much larger than the Eun-ha-3 launched from the site back in 2012. North Korea says the rocket was part of a peaceful space program, but South Korea and the U.S. remain concerned that the advancements in technology mean Pyongyang is getting closer to developing an intercontinental ballistic missile.
The UN Committee on Racial Discrimination has begun a review of Japan for the first time since 2010 as reports of hate speech against foreign residents, including Koreans in Japan, have come to the committee's attention. And the Korean community there says there's urgent need for action. Our Kim Hyun-bin has the details.
The United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination has begun a review of concerns about hate speech against Koreans residing in Japan to determine if the country has violated the international convention aimed at eliminating racial discrimination. The review comes amid reports of anti-Korean protests on the streets of Japan, as Korea and Japan are dealing with tense diplomatic relations over historical issues. The committee has expressed particular concern about reports of a right-wing group that was said to have used racially derogatory terms against Korean residents in Japan. The committee has also urged the Japanese government to pass a new bill to bring its laws into line with the convention. Although Japan is party to the convention, it does not have a law that bans racial discrimination, including hate speech. Korean nationals in Japan say there is an urgent need for a new policy, as their rights are being violated.
Our biggest goal for the Japanese government is to pass a bill banning racial discrimination.
Tokyo says it must first determine whether a new policy will conflict with its freedom of speech laws. The International Convention took effect in 1969 and it requires parties to outlaw hate speech. Kim Jae-yun, Arirang News.
This coming Sunday will mark the 22nd anniversary of diplomatic ties between South Korea and China. And within that span of time, China has become Korea's biggest trading partner.
But this growing economic dependence comes with its own anxieties, and that's become all too clear with the recent slowdown in Korean exports to the world's #2 economy. Our Hwang Ji-hye tells us more about the future challenges.
In a little over 2 decades, Korea and China saw their trade volume increase 35-fold to over $220 billion. Now, China is Korea's biggest trading partner in terms of imports and exports, exceeding the United States and Japan and taking up more than a quarter of Korea's total exports. Korea is also China's 4th largest trading partner. But a recent slump in Korea's shipments to China that plunged 7% in July, marking the 3rd straight month of decline, point to some challenges ahead.
The drop is coming from the slide in Chinese outbound shipments as Korean firms largely export intermediary goods to China. But aside from this kind of temporary reason, Chinese firms are now improving their own supply capacity as well.
Adding that old business strategies will no longer sustain shipments to China, experts say the focus should now be on producing high-quality finished goods. The Korean government is also joining efforts to sustain trade flows that make up half of the nation's output. Earlier this week, President Park Geun-hye asked Jack Ma, the executive chairman of Chinese e-commerce giant Alibaba, to help Korea's small and medium-sized enterprises expand into China's online market. Still, there are opportunities that could lead to a pickup in exports to China.
Negotiations for the Korea-China Free Trade Agreement are in the final stages, and the deal is expected to take effect as early as next year. The trade pact could boost exports to China.
Experts say the popularity of Korean television soap operas and films in China will make it easier for local exporters to overcome uncertainties in the world's 2nd biggest economy. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
So is there a limit to the Korea-China friendship? For that, we have our Hwang Sung-hee here in the studio. So Sung-hee, before we go into the restraints between the Seoul and Beijing relationship, let's talk about the phenomenal closeness that's happened after President Park Geun-hye came into office.
Well, Sean, when it comes to public opinion on the warming Korea-China ties, the numbers tell it all. 6 out of 10 South Koreans think relations with China have improved under President Park, according to a poll conducted by the Asan Institute for Policy Studies earlier this year. Now, President Xi became the first Chinese leader ever to visit Seoul in July before visiting Pyongyang, and adding to the symbolic significance of the trip was a handful of security-related agreements, like holding high-level defense talks on a regular basis and also setting up a military hotline within this year. So previously, their ties were just limited to economic cooperation.
And convincing North Korea to give up its nuclear program is basically the key area where South Korea needs Chinese help for. But we are seeing some changes with the new Chinese administration, right?
Well, that's right. China took a stronger stance on North Korea following its third nuclear test last year, visibly cutting off its traditional pattern of pampering Pyongyang with financial and political support. But that doesn't mean China will shut out North Korea altogether. The two allies talked for nearly 2 hours on the sidelines of the ASEAN Regional Forum in Myanmar earlier this month. And experts say China's North Korea policy will never fundamentally change.
Under the current structure of strategic competition between Washington and Beijing, the strategic value of North Korea is very high. Therefore, China does not trust North Korea and is very frustrated, but absolutely has no plans to shut it out.
So China is not really taking sides, but trying a rather balanced approach on the two Koreas.
All right, and so in other relations within the region, some are expecting a summit between China and Japan in the coming months. And although Seoul and Beijing share historical animosity against Tokyo, should we be concerned of them ganging up on us?
Well, Sean, countering Japan's historical denial is a shared agenda between China and South Korea, and President Xi Jinping definitely put a great deal of emphasis there when he visited Seoul in July.
In the first half of the 20th century, Japanese militarists barbarously invaded China and Korea, swallowing up Korea and occupying half of the Chinese mainland.
But movements in China-Japan ties are a nail-biter for officials in Seoul, as the two sides are speculated to have discussed last month a November summit on the sidelines of the APEC meeting in Beijing. Analysts say a summit is likely, and if so, it will leave South Korea out in the cold. And to prevent that, President Park should decrease her dependence on Beijing.
That doesn't mean you give in to Abe on his historical agenda, to be sure, but you have to stand there and very forcefully make your case on a public stage. So I think South Korea needs to do that, because in the end, Xi Jinping is not going to do that on South Korea's behalf.
So what's next for South Korea's diplomatic attitude to China?
Well, Terry, South Korea is playing what's known as a tightrope diplomacy. Better relations with China are considered one of President Park's diplomatic achievements, but given Beijing's underlying tensions with Seoul's key ally, Washington, experts say the goal for South Korea is to get as close to the fine line that it's walking on, but never cross it, which so far President Park and her team have been able to do so.
Right, certainly not a very easy task, but one that seems to be going well so far. Thanks so much, Sang-eun, for that report.
My pleasure.
The Pentagon says that Islamic State militants have emerged as the most dangerous threat to the United States.
With more, we turn to Paul Yi at the News Center. Paul, U.S. military leaders are saying that it's crucial that this jihadist group is defeated, not just in Iraq, but also in Syria.
That's right, and following the gruesome beheading of an American journalist by the group, the United States says it will not back down. Speaking at a Pentagon briefing on Thursday, Secretary of Defense of Chuck Hagel said the group, also known as ISIL and ISIS, was better armed, better trained, and better funded than any recent militant threat.
ISIL is as sophisticated and well-funded as any group that we have seen. They're beyond just a terrorist group.
Hagel also stressed that U.S. military involvement in Iraq will continue with the help of other allies. However, he noted that combating the militant group would ultimately require political reforms in both Iraq and Syria. And moving on to the deadly Ebola outbreak, 2 Americans who contracted the virus in Liberia have survived and been discharged from a hospital in Atlanta, Georgia. The U.S. aid workers, Dr. Kent Brantley and Nancy Wrightball, were treated with the experimental drug ZMapp, and it appears they've made a full recovery after nearly 3 weeks in isolation. And according to doctors, they now pose no risk to the public.
The medical staff here at Emory is confident that the discharge from the hospital of both of these patients poses no public health threat.
Meanwhile, the Ebola epidemic continues to take a toll. The World Health Organization says more than 2,400 people have been infected and more than 1,300 people have died since the initial outbreak in West Africa back in March. And heading now to Malaysia, where a national day of mourning has been declared as the first bodies from the crash of flight MH17 return home. Millions of Malaysians fell silent this morning in tribute to their 43 countrymen who were killed in the downing of a passenger jet, the second air disaster to hit the country this year. A somber repatriation ceremony at Kuala Lumpur International Airport was held shortly after, as remains of 20 Malaysian passengers arrived from Amsterdam. All 298 passengers and crew on board flight MH17 died more than 5 weeks ago. However, authorities say some of the victims have yet to be identified. Meanwhile, the Netherlands has suspended operations to recover remains and debris from the Malaysia Airlines crash site in eastern Ukraine. Investigators cited security concerns as fighting continues between government forces and pro-Russian separatists. And finally, on a lighter note, the world's largest rubber duck has made a big splash in the U.S. state of California after traveling halfway around the world. The 6-story, 11-ton rubber duck floated into the port of Los Angeles on Wednesday to take part in a boat festival. The famous yellow freighter was created by Dutch artist Florijin Hoffman, who described it as a friendly ambassador to help relieve the world's tensions.
I'm pretty excited. I haven't seen anything this big before, and I'm really excited to see him come to the Port of LA. I think it's going to bring a lot of people in for the Tall Ship Festival, and I'm just really excited to see a big rubber ducky.
The giant duck has also appeared at waterfronts in many other countries, including Australia, Brazil, China, and Japan. And that wraps up our look at international stories making headlines around the world. I'll see you back here Monday night.
Korea's leading orchestra, the Seoul Philharmonic, has kicked off its European tour in Finland. And our Park Geun-hye, who is actually traveling with the orchestra, takes us through the first performance.
Finland's oldest city, Turku, was once the capital of the country until the early 19th century. The city is known for both historic and natural attractions. And every summer, the city boasts another important tourist attraction, the Turku Music Festival, the oldest classical music festival in the Northern European country. And it's here where Korea's leading orchestra, the Seoul Philharmonic, begins its European tour as one of dozens of international guest artists invited by the annual music event, now in its 55th year.
Seoul Philharmonic is one of the best orchestras in Asia, and as you know, Maestro Chung will make his debut, long-awaited debut, in Finland. He is one of the greatest conductors of our time, so this was obviously something that we wanted to offer to our public.
The orchestra opens the stage with Beethoven's Piano Concerto No. 3, followed by Debussy's La Mer and Ravel's La Valse, led by Maestro Chung Myung-hoon.
As far as the repertoire is concerned, we try to give a good balance of works, classical, romantic, contemporary, so it shows the versatility of the orchestra.
Audience members raved about the performance by one of Asia's top orchestras, which traveled a very long way to take the stage.
First of all, I want to say it was beyond words. It was so good. It's awesome. I mean, it was once in a lifetime you get to experience something that's perfect.
I would like to go after then when they're going to have next concert wherever they have it. They were so fantastic.
The Seoul Philharmonic Orchestra will continue their tour with performances to be held in Austria, Italy, and Great Britain. Park Geun-hye, Arirang News, Turku.
Korean period blockbuster Roaring Currents is still going strong, smashing record after record on the domestic box office charts. The grand success of the movie is also driving sales of books about Korea's most revered naval hero, Admiral Lee Sun-shin. Our Shin Se-min has the story on the latest pop culture phenomenon that's reviving historical literature.
Over 15 million tickets sold and still counting. The movie Roaring Currents has roared past its competition to claim sole possession as the highest-grossing film in Korean history. Choi Min-sik, who plays Admiral Lee Sun-shin in the period film, says he still can't fully digest all the attention.
This is all surreal to me. I'm glad that the movie was able to open up ground that allows different generations to come together.
Korea's most watched movie of all time hasn't just been a hit on the silver screens. The craze has permeated into other industries, leading to increased sales of books and even modules related to Admiral Lee. Miniatures of the battleship used during the battle have tripled in sales at this specialty shop, and interest is growing.
Watching the film has broadened my view, and these replica figures and even unknown books on Admiral Yi now catch my attention.
Sales of biographies and non-fiction titles are also booming. More people are looking to read up on Korea's most famous admiral, and according to Kyobo Bookstore, the number of books sold have surged sixfold compared to the same period last year. As for why all this interest, movie critic Chun Chan-il says the timing of its release has played a big role.
The fact that there isn't a firm role model like Admiral Lee in the nation is eventually coming to light through the popularity of this movie. It means that many people are wanting to rest and lean on such leadership that's shown by the character.
Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Hello and welcome to sports. Starting with football, Lee Dong-guk, a longtime mainstay for South Korea and the K-League's top scorer this season, is making his return to the national team. 35-year-old Jeonbuk Hyundai Motor striker joins the squad after more than a year for their September friendlies. Now, don't let the age fool you. Like fine wine, he's only gotten better with time. 100 of his 164 K-League goals came after the age of 30, along with 8 of his 30 national team goals. And with 99 caps for South Korea, one more would put him in the exclusive Century Club, a milestone feat. And in other football news, 3 big domestic leagues in Europe are opening this weekend. Spain's La Liga, Germany's Bundesliga, and France's Ligue 1. So if you're a football fan, you're in luck. The Bundesliga and Ligue 1 start with matches on Friday night local time, while La Liga matches kick off Saturday. They follow the English Premier League and Dutch Eredivisie, already underway. Meanwhile, Italy's Serie A opens next weekend. And moving to the greens, it's a very busy weekend for golf as well, with several tournaments going on. Let's start with the men. It's the first stop of the FedEx Cup playoffs at the Barclays Championship. Only the top 100 golfers in points will make the cut. Now for the ladies, it's the Canadian Pacific Women's Open, where Yoo So-yeon holds the lead at 9 under par. Park Geun-hye is 3 shots behind at 6 under. Now the KPGA, KLPGA, and the European Tour is in action as well. And back here at home, it's Friday's KBO matchup between the Tusan Bears and the Samsung Lions in Daegu. Now the Bears' Dustin Nippert goes up against Samsung's Yoon Sung-hwan. Now we fast forward to the second inning. Tusan strikes first. It's a Hong Sung-eun homer over center field. And next inning, Jorge Cantu adds 2 runs off a single, and the Bears go up by 3. Now another Tusan runner comes home in the 7th for another score. But a pair of home runs in the 8th by Samsung makes it very, very close. And a second Park Seok-min blast evens it up in the 9th inning. But in the 10th, the Bears' Hong Sung-eun singles one home, and Tusan holds on to win 5-4. 4. And looking at the other games, LG beats Kia 3-2. Hanwha wins over SK 8-3. Meanwhile, NC takes down Nexon 2-1. And that wraps it up for sports. This has been Stephen Che. Have a great weekend. But first, your weather update is up next.
Hello everyone, I'm Kim Bo-kyung with your weather updates. Some unwelcome news that a pre-fine dust warning has issued for Seoul, and we're seeing 91 micrograms per cubic meter, which is approximately 2 times the normal levels. Shifting our focus for a bit, the Korea Meteorological Administration expects September to be slightly hotter than seasonal average, while seasonal average range weather is in forecast for October and November. At the moment, skies are clear nationwide for the most part, and on Saturday, most parts of the country are looking at sunny skies with slightly higher mercury levels compared to today. And then on Sunday, showers are set to make a comeback in the southern regions, and this will spread nationwide by Monday. Moving on to tomorrow's readings, Seoul and Gwangju hit 30 degrees while Daegu soars to 32. As for other places, Daejeon and Jeju make it to the high 20s, Dokdo to 26. That's all for now. Hope you have a wonderful Friday evening.
Thank you very much, Bo-kyung, for that. And that will do it for this edition of Primetime News.
Thanks so much for watching. Have a great weekend. We'll see you soon.